podcast show for business owners and managers who are passionate about developing people and growing a successful business. And now here's your host, Alistair Booth from the HR Booth.
Welcome back to the channel and thanks again for tuning in. So this episode this week is actually going to be on salary exchange or salary sacrifice, as you may know the term. And the reason for that is that we held our monthly update last week with the team, and as part of that update, we're just kind of having a discussion with the team just to kind of find out what kind of general things were coming up from our clients, the first couple of weeks back in 2025, and just to kind of understand what some of the kind of common themes are. And what is kind of coming out loud and clear from our clients, and I'm certainly picking this up as well from the businesses that I'm speaking to, is that a lot of businesses are really concerned around some of the financial pressures this year with the national minimum wage increases, but also more importantly for them is the increase in national insurance, which is coming in April. So I think a lot of businesses are really finding some difficulty around how they're going to kind of navigate that this year, and obviously the additional kind of cost pressures that's going to put on their business. And that's certainly feedback that the team are picking up when speaking to our clients. So it made me think around what can we do to try and perhaps educate some of our clients and educate businesses on some steps that you could perhaps take to mitigate, I suppose, the potential risk around the increase in national minimum wage, but also the increase in the national insurance, which is coming in April. So obviously, worst case scenario for a business is then having to make job cuts, so looking at maybe redundancies and things like that. So we also want to avoid that situation where we can, and I think the other option for businesses is potentially looking at things like increasing their price or looking at other kind of cost saving measures in the business. But what I wanted to kind of speak about on this episode was salary exchange or salary sacrifice, as you kind of may know the term. And the reason for that is I think there's a kind of common misconception that salary exchange is something that just kind of big corporates can do, and a lot of kind of smaller perhaps businesses or SME businesses don't really know much about it. So what to try and do in this podcast was just kind of share a little bit around what salary exchange is, what the benefits are to you as a business, and what the kind of benefits would be to your employees as well. So that's what we're going to cover in today's episode. So salary exchange, and it used to be referred to as salary sacrifice, and I think it perhaps is in some cases, but I think people kind of saw salary sacrifice as something they were kind of giving up. So the terminology was kind of updated a few years ago, and it was referred to salary exchange. And what that essentially means is that employees exchange a part of their salary for different employee benefits. So, some of that, would include things like pension contributions. It could include cycle to work schemes. I think there's opportunities for things like buying IT equipment, some opportunities to do that. Pension is something that's really quite common, and I think years gone by before the legislation changed on this, childcare vouchers, and that was something that I certainly did a number of years back when we paid for childcare for Harry. I was able to kind of reduce my salary, exchange that for childcare vouchers, and it meant that the national insurance that I was kind of paying was less as an employee, and also kind of suited my employer at the time around that as well. So that's essentially what salary exchange is. So the advantage with that is potentially if you've got an employee who is on £35,000 a year, you're obviously paying kind of national insurance based on that salary. If they were, for example, to exchange, say, £5,000 worth of their salary for, say, their company pension, it might be a cycle to work scheme, for example, included within that as well. That means that you're then only paying national insurance on that £30,000 a year. So that's a cost saving to you as a business, but it's also a cost saving to the employee as well. So that's certainly something you might want to consider. So the most common benefits around salary exchanges, as I mentioned earlier, are things like pension contributions. So they can exchange part of their salary for additional pension contributions, and that could be kind of matched by you as the employer. Cycle to work schemes still remain quite popular, and that was something that's been in place for a number of years. And I think, during COVID, that was something that was encouraged a lot more. So you kind of see more people going out walking, going out cycling, and cycle to work schemes were something that kind of came about quite a bit during COVID, and that has kind of continued. So it's a good way for employees and employers, but the employee can get access to kind of brand new bikes and accessories. There's nothing potentially stopping them taking additional kind of bikes and accessories for any family members, and they can then, rather than kind of paying that as an upfront cost to one of the big retailers, they can kind of do that through a salary exchange kind of benefit, and that is then kind of paid through salary. So as I say, benefit to you as the employer around that, that your national insurance costs will be less, and it's also, I suppose, you're encouraging a little bit of kind of health and well-being in the workplace as well around that. Another one that I kind of want to touch on, which is becoming a little bit more common, and this has kind of come about in recent times as well, is around electric vehicle leasing. So what that allows people to do in your business is essentially exchange part of their salary for an electric low emission kind of car lease. So, people in your team are perhaps already got a vehicle. They might be kind of doing that through a lease agreement with a car dealership. So they might be on like a hire purchase agreement. They might be doing a PCP deal, or they might have a kind of bank loan or something like that to kind of pay for that. So that's obviously quite costly for them in terms of the interest that's perhaps been paid on that. So what you could look at is a salary exchange model where they can kind of get a brand new electric vehicle, and it's done as a salary exchange scheme through you as the employer. So the benefits to that is that they're kind of getting a new car, they're paying less national insurance, you're paying less national insurance as the employer, and it's allowing the team to get access to a kind of brand new kind of car that otherwise they might not be able to kind of afford the kind of payments on. So benefits to you as a business around that isn't just the national insurance kind of savings, but that could potentially help you attract talent into your business, because some of your competitors might not be doing anything like that. It also allows you to retain that talent in the business as well, because they see that as an additional kind of benefit and not just the other kind of benefits that you're kind of offering. So it gives them that kind of financial kind of flexibility as well. So definitely something to kind of consider. And as you're kind of planning ahead for April 2025 and around some of the changes that you can make, then look at a kind of salary exchange kind of model and see if that's something you can help in your business. Only kind of pitfalls really around that to consider is that anything around salary exchange, what you need to be mindful of is that nobody could drop below the kind of national minimum wage around that. So if you've got someone who is perhaps just kind of above the national minimum wage, a salary exchange kind of scheme is probably not going to be beneficial to them, because they can't drop their salary below that kind of threshold. So that's certainly something you kind of need to have a kind of look at as you if that's something you're kind of keen to perhaps implement. Is just kind of have a look at your the kind of wage structures within your business and see if that's something that you can accommodate or not. Another thing to kind of be aware of is that the employees must consent to it. So you can't just impose salary exchange. It's not something you can just kind of bring in unilaterally. So it's something you'd have to kind of get their consent form. There needs to be an updated contract to reflect that, and that's something that's held in writing and held on file. And as I said earlier, the employees can't fall below the national kind of minimum wage on that. Other things to perhaps consider from an employee perspective where it might not feel attractive, and that might be where someone is perhaps looking to apply for a mortgage. And I think historically the lenders have looked for something like kind of 3 times the salary. I think it might be more than that potentially now, but say it was 3 times their salary. And if, for example, someone is on a £30,000 a year salary, 3 times that is £90,000 that they could potentially borrow through the lender. If their salary is exchanged and it looks like it's £25,000 per year, then, for example, the lender might think the borrowing could only be £75,000. So it would really be up to individuals to get some independent financial advice if that's something that could impact on them. But essentially, their take-home pay is really going to suffer from an exchange kind of scheme. So that's a little bit around kind of salary exchange or salary sacrifice. If that's something you want to kind of find out a little bit more about before April 2025 and looking at ways in which you can try and mitigate the risk around the national insurance kind of cost increase that's coming in April, then feel free to reach out to us. You can do that in the usual places, which is through the website, which is www.thehrbooth.co.uk, or you can contact us via email at info@thehrbooth.co.uk. So hopefully that's kind of been of some use, and definitely worth doing a little bit more research on salary exchange to see if that's something that can help you in your business. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will be back soon with a future episode.